It's Thursday, 13 February. Welcome to the President's Daily Brief. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. All right, let's get briefed. We'll start things off today with President Trump announcing that negotiations to end the Ukraine war will begin immediately following a call that he held with Vladimir Putin. The news comes as the U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warns EU and NATO defense chiefs that Ukraine's goal of returning to its 2014 borders isn't realistic. Later in the show, as the Gaza ceasefire hangs by a thread, Israel has begun calling up military reservists in preparation for renewed conflict. Plus, a bombshell in Ukraine, where intelligence officials revealed that one of the nation's most powerful men has been secretly working for Russia. And in today's Back of the Brief, President Trump scores a major win as Tulsi Gabbard is confirmed by the Senate as the new Director of National Intelligence after a very tough confirmation battle. But first, today's PDB Spotlight. In what could prove to be a major diplomatic breakthrough, President Trump revealed that he held what he described as a, quote, lengthy and highly productive phone call with Russian President Putin on Wednesday morning, seeking a peace deal to end Moscow's three-year-old war on Ukraine. It marked the first conversation between the president and the Russian strongman since Trump's return to office, as well as Putin's first contact with a sitting U.S. president since February 2022, after contact was broken off following Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Now, the conversation reportedly lasted for an hour and a half, during which the pair agreed to start negotiations immediately to bring the war to a close. In a lengthy post on Truth Social, Trump said, quote, "We both agreed we want to stop the millions of deaths taking place in the war with Russia and Ukraine. We agreed to work together very closely, including visiting each other's nations. We've also agreed to have our respective teams start negotiations immediately," end quote. Now, Trump said that a delegation led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Director of the CIA John Ratcliffe, National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, and Ambassador and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will lead the talks, and expressed hopes that a negotiated settlement could be achieved in the very near future, though he refrained from outlining a timetable. The call came in the wake of a prisoner exchange on Tuesday that saw Russia release Mark Fogel. He's an American teacher who was detained in Russia for 3.5 years, which White House officials said marked a thawing of relations between Moscow and Washington. Following his call with Putin, Trump spoke with Ukrainian President Zelensky, who he said is also eager to pursue a peace deal. Now, Zelensky has long expressed a willingness to engage with Putin on a, quote, just settlement to the war, and suggested earlier this week that he would consider trading areas of Russia's Kursk region, currently occupied by Kyiv's forces, in order to gain back some of Ukraine's lost territory. Trump added that a meeting is being set up on Friday at the annual Munich Security Conference in Germany between Zelensky, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Secretary of State Rubio, though details of what they will discuss were not disclosed. So, what might the Trump administration's plan for peace look like? While the White House is keeping details of their strategy close to the vest, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth gave a preview of some of the broader aspects of their plan during a meeting at NATO headquarters in Brussels on Wednesday. Hegseth echoed Trump's past statements that any negotiations must acknowledge some harsh realities, including that Ukraine will not be able to regain the roughly 20% of territory seized by Russia since the war began, along with Crimea and the eastern Donbass region. He also said Kyiv's potential membership in the NATO alliance is not, quote, a realistic outcome. Hegseth told his fellow NATO military allies, quote, "We want, like you, a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine, but we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective. Chasing this illusionary goal, he said, will only prolong the war and cause more suffering," end quote. Hegseth added that any durable peace deal would need to rely on robust security guarantees from European allies, not the U.S. He endorsed proposals to send a coalition of European peacekeeping troops to Ukraine to enforce any potential settlement, but, most critically, said they should only be deployed as part of a non-NATO mission, meaning, importantly, that they would not be covered under the alliance's mutual defense clause. The defense secretary's remarks reflected Trump's intent to make Europe shoulder most of the financial and military burden of any settlement to the war. But Zelensky said earlier this week that U.S. muscle is critical to achieving any lasting peace deal and suggested he could woo Trump with economic incentives. Now, I'm not sure if Zelensky actually used the word woo. As we discussed earlier this week on the PDB, Trump has spoken of striking a $500 billion deal with Ukraine to access the country's rare earth minerals in exchange for continued financial and military assistance from the U.S. Still, the defense secretary said the U.S. has other global priorities that require our focus, namely the threat from China, and said Wednesday that Europe must provide the overwhelming share of future lethal and non-lethal aid to Ukraine. He added, quote, "The United States remains committed to the NATO alliance, but the U.S. will no longer tolerate an imbalanced relationship which encourages dependency," end quote. All right. Coming up next, Israel calls up reservists as the Gaza ceasefire teeters, and in Ukraine, a top official is exposed as a Russian mole. I'll be right back. Running a business isn't easy. I know that firsthand. As a business owner, I have seen how managing finances can turn into a time-consuming headache, right? With endless receipts, approvals, and expense tracking slowing everything down. Well, that's where Ramp comes in. Ramp streamlines finance operations by automating the entire process. No more chasing receipts or manually logging expenses. Ramp takes care of it all, instantly matching receipts, categorizing purchases, and approving transactions while integrating seamlessly with your ERP for real-time visibility. For finance teams buried in busy work, well, Ramp flips the equation. Look, most companies spend some 80% of their time on low-value tasks and only 20% on strategy. Think about that. Think how ineffective that is. Well, Ramp changes that, freeing up your time to focus on forecasting, growth, and high-impact decisions. Making the switch is effortless. Look, over 25,000 businesses, including Shopify and the Boys and Girls Club of America, trust Ramp, earning it the #1 ranking in spend management by G2. And now, for a limited time, listeners of this show can get $250 when you join Ramp. And it's simple. Just go to ramp.com/PDB. That's ramp.com/PDB. Once again, that's ramp.com/PDB. Cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC, and as they say, terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the PDB. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu delivered a clear-cut warning to Hamas, declaring that if the terror group does not release more hostages by midday Saturday, Israel will abandon the ceasefire and resume military operations in the Gaza Strip. Netanyahu's ultimatum came after Hamas on Monday abruptly postponed the next scheduled hostage release, accusing Israel of violating the terms of the fragile 3-week-old truce. The Iran-backed terror group alleged that Israeli forces carried out deadly shootings, obstructed humanitarian aid deliveries, and barred Palestinians from returning to northern Gaza. Following an emergency meeting with Israel's security cabinet, which unanimously backed his stance, Netanyahu vowed, quote, "If Hamas does not return our hostages by Saturday noon, the ceasefire will end, and the IDF will return to intense fighting until Hamas is finally defeated," end quote. As our listeners know here on the PDB, Netanyahu's statement closely followed President Trump's own warning to Hamas on Monday, in which he threatened that if hostages weren't released by, quote, Saturday at 12 o'clock, then, quote, all bets are off and all hell is going to break out. However, on Tuesday, a Hamas spokesman reaffirmed the terror group's commitment to the truce, though he did not reverse the delay in hostage releases. In an interview with NBC News, the terror group's spokesman dismissed Trump's threat, stating that Gaza was already, quote, living in a state of hell. The Hamas spokesman added, "Of course, that's entirely the fault of Hamas, given that we started this mess by slaughtering Israeli citizens during the 7 October attacks." Okay, fair enough. He didn't actually say that last bit. I mean, frankly, the Hamas spokesman is not known for being self-aware and contrite. The stalled exchange would have been the 6th such swap since the ceasefire began. Under the first phase of the truce, which took effect on 19 January and is set to last for 42 days, Hamas has so far released 16 of 33 hostages, along with 5 Thai nationals. In return, Israel freed over 730 Palestinian prisoners. Still, 76 hostages remain in the Strip, at least 35 of whom are believed to be dead. Meanwhile, Trump has continued to push his own vision for Gaza, arguing that its over 2 million residents should be relocated so the U.S. could take control and develop the territory into the Riviera of the Middle East. On Tuesday, Netanyahu confirmed that Israel's security cabinet had formally endorsed Trump's proposal. The fragility of the ceasefire has also spurred a flurry of regional diplomatic efforts. The Arab League Secretary General announced plans to revive the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative, well, that worked well, which offered Israel normalized relations in exchange for Palestinian statehood. Egypt, a key mediator in the ceasefire agreement, is set to host an emergency Arab summit on 27 February, shortly after Trump extended an invitation to the Egyptian president for discussions at the White House. As uncertainty mounts, Israel has begun mobilizing military reservists in preparation for a possible return to full-scale combat. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz reinforced Netanyahu's warning, bluntly stating, quote, "If Hamas stops the hostage releases, then there is no ceasefire, and there is war," end quote. Katz went further, suggesting that a, quote, "new Gaza war could pave the way for Israel to implement Trump's sweeping vision for the enclave. Okay, turning now to Ukraine, where intelligence services uncovered a major security breach on Wednesday, announcing the head of Kyiv's anti-terrorist center has been working as a Russian mole. Yeah, that would qualify as a major security breach. The suspect, whose identity has not been disclosed, was arrested personally by Vasyl Malyuk, who is chief of the Security Service of Ukraine, or the SBU. Malyuk accused the suspect of passing classified intelligence to the Kremlin's Federal Security Service in exchange for cash and, reportedly, out of ideological loyalty. But mostly cash. The SBU caught the former security official passing the sensitive information to Moscow a minimum of 14 times. Investigators employed round-the-clock wiretaps, gained access to the suspect's mobile devices and computers, and even infiltrated the alleged traitor's encrypted communications. Malyuk, in a video posted on the SBU website, stated, quote, "We practically had to live together with him," explaining how investigators documented his contacts with Russian operatives. The agency made no effort to soften its condemnation, branding the suspect a, quote, "rat," and underscoring that he had not acted alone. His Russian handlers were reportedly former Ukrainian officials who years earlier had helped suppress the pro-Western Euromaidan revolution before fleeing to Moscow after those protests. For Kyiv, this case is more than just another counterintelligence win. It lays bare the extent of Russian penetration within the Ukraine's security structures, a vulnerability that President Zelensky's government has been aggressively campaigning to root out. The SBU chief confirmed that Zelensky had been kept in the loop throughout the counterintelligence operation, which ultimately turned the tables on Moscow. Not only did Ukraine neutralize an embedded Russian asset, but officials also disclosed that the SBU fed disinformation to the suspect, allowing for false intelligence to reach Russian command. Malyuk stated, quote, "We continue to self-clean our ranks, signaling that Kyiv's hunt for infiltrators is, well, far from over." All right, coming up in the back of the brief, Tulsi Gabbard secures a key role in President Trump's national security team, overcoming a fierce Senate confirmation battle to become the new Director of National Intelligence, the DNI. I'll be right back with the details. In today's Back of the Brief, after an uphill battle in the U.S. Senate, Tulsi Gabbard has been confirmed to President Donald Trump's cabinet as the next Director of National Intelligence, the DNI. Gabbard becomes Trump's 14th successful cabinet confirmation following a 52-48 vote on Wednesday that fell largely along party lines, with the exception of Senator Mitch McConnell, who was the lone GOP holdout. Gabbard, a former Democrat congresswoman from Hawaii and a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserves, was considered one of Trump's more controversial picks and faced intense pushback from members of her former party during her tumultuous confirmation, as well as from a handful of GOP skeptics. There were widespread reservations about her qualifications for the role, as well as concerns about her past views on Russia, support for NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden, and a controversial 2017 meeting that she held with now-deposed Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad. But the bulk of the GOP holdouts were ultimately swayed to vote yes by Senator Tom Cotton. He's the chairman of the Select Committee on Intelligence, and Vice President J.D. Vance, who reportedly coordinated a last-minute campaign to persuade the Republican skeptics and push Gabbard over the line. Hours after the vote on Wednesday, she was officially sworn into her position by Attorney General Pam Bondi during a ceremony in the Oval Office. Gabbard, who once ran for president as a Democrat but left the party in 2022, pledged to refocus the priorities of the agencies under her charge and work to restore public trust in the intelligence community, which she argues was weaponized and politicized under the previous administration. In remarks from the Oval Office, Trump praised her service record, saying, quote, "Tulsi has always distinguished herself as a leader of the highest caliber. She's earned the respect and admiration and the love of Americans on both sides of the aisle with her profound commitment to the values that keep us free," end quote. In her new role as DNI, Gabbard will oversee the 18 agencies that make up the U.S. intelligence community and function as Trump's senior advisor on all intelligence matters. As part of her duties, she will also be charged with preparing the president's daily intelligence brief, which, while not as interesting or insightful as Mike Baker's President's Daily Brief, is still important. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Thursday, 13 February. Now, if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. And as all the cool kids know, to listen to the show ad-free, well, it's simple. Become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by visiting pdbpremium.com. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.